What is going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Cast. I'm your host, Big E. We have a loaded show for you today. Now, a lot of people seem to be frustrated with the president and Republican leadership in general. Also, it turns out that I may have actually been wrong about institutional racism. And if this is true, I will reluctantly admit my error. The left proves once again how wrong they are about gun control, because they want to have it both ways. I will address the Bubba Wallace incident one last time, and Black Lives Matter is running the Marxist playbook step by step. We will get into all of that and a whole lot more straight ahead. So President Trump has a lot of people upset. With all the unrest that's going on, statues being torn down, police departments being disbanded, police departments watching shootouts as they happen, as they drive by, not responding to calls. Atlanta, Minneapolis, Seattle, Chaz/Chop, which has since gone the way of the dodo and is no more, but all of these areas are seeing violent crime spike. The murder rate is skyrocketing, and all we're seeing from President Trump are tweets promising action if the local governments don't step up and do what needs to be done. And I understand why people would be upset. I get it. It's dragged on entirely too long. I believe it's over 5 weeks now at this point, maybe close to 6. Now, I know that there is a political calculus going on. This is an election year. We're 4 months away from the election. Whatever the president does, the media is going to light him up. They're going to scorch him. But then again, for President Trump, that's pretty much Tuesday. Now, admittedly, I have been in the camp to let Chaz/Chop, Minneapolis, any of the other cities that are being lackadaisical in their policing, let them burn. Local officials will take a hit regardless. But as I said before, it's been going on 5 or 6 weeks now. For that long, it's time for the president to act. Now, I know he signed an executive order protecting American monuments and things of that nature, and that's fine. But that's not all that's going on. And now I have evolved to the point where I'm like, pick a city, send in the troops, wreck shop, and restore order. That is one of the reasons that we elected President Trump in the first place. He was the law and order candidate. Enforce the border. And we still haven't had that done to the level that we would like. And again, and going back to these liberal cities that are hampering their police departments, what's going on is not fair to the residents of those cities. The law-abiding people who did not participate in these protests may be upset at what went on with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, but are still being basically held hostage by the likes of Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all the rest of it. So if the local officials, if the city council, the mayor, alderman, whatever the case may be, if they are not going to protect their citizens, then the president needs to do it. He needs to step in. And a lot of people are getting irritated with the fact that he's not doing anything. He's tweeting again and promising action. But at this point, the tweeting needs to stop, and he needs to call in the troops and get it done. Because this has gone on long enough, and it's ridiculous. So we'll see if this executive order gets enforced. we'll see if it has teeth, and when they start to deface and tear down these statues, these monuments, that federal officials step in and do what needs to be done and handle it. All right, I wanted to mention that real quick because that's something that I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm feeling it. I had this discussion with my wife just the other day about that same thing, so I just wanted to get that out there. But there's a lot I want to get to, so we're gonna move on and talk about something else that's been in the news quite a bit, and that is this idea of institutional racism. I know we've talked about it before. I've said repeatedly that there is no such thing as institutional racism. And I'm not above admitting that I was wrong. Come on, Big E, you're never wrong. Shocking, I know. Shocking to me. But I was wrong. Affirmative action is an institution. It's being used throughout the entire university system. College campuses all over the country are using affirmative action. And it is most definitely racism. So it does exist. I got you, didn't I? So it does exist, just not in the way that the Marxists or the leftists. So it does exist, just not in the way that the leftists and the Marxists would have us believe. But it also exists in Lincoln County, Oregon, where they have, for all intents and purposes, restarted Jim Crow laws. The Lincoln County Board of Commissioners issued an order for everyone to wear masks, except for people of color. I'm quoting from the original order. People of color who have heightened concerns about racial profiling and harassment due to wearing face coverings in public are exempt from this rule. Now, not only is this blatantly racist, but it makes no sense. Racial profiling, wearing a face covering is going to heighten concerns of racial profiling. Why? I'm baffled as to why that would be the hill to die on in terms of racial profiling. Wearing a mask? What? People are not going to be able to tell that someone's black with a mask on, or non-white anyway, because the policy also applies to Native Americans. How is it not blatantly obvious to these people that this is racist? Now, they have seen the error of their ways, and they have bowed to the pressure and removed that exception from this order, and seem genuinely surprised at the level of backlash that they got for it. And you would think that some of these people, with the level of education, the level of, well, it's not really common sense because they don't seem to have any, but you would think that some of these people would have at least balked at the notion of accepting people of color from this order, and seen somewhere down the line that they would face some backlash for this. But they seem genuinely taken aback, and I don't get it. One more quick story I wanted to mention on this issue of racism. A lecturer at Cambridge University in the UK, Priyamvada Gopal, sent a couple of ridiculous tweets. The first one, abolish whiteness. And the second one, white lives don't matter as white lives. Now, she tried to explain it away, saying that there was some context that those of us who objected to that tweet were too dumb to understand. Now, she's since claimed that Twitter deleted the tweet. I'm not sure that I buy that, but anyway, the tweet's gone. So there's really no way to see the context to which she was referring. But then she ends up getting promoted from lecturer to professor right after this tweet, which, again, baffles me. I guess it shouldn't baffle me, because what it does is suggest that Cambridge University supports wholeheartedly what she said. But in her explanation of the now deleted tweets, she wrote, I would also like to make clear that I stand by my tweets, now deleted by Twitter, not me. They were very clearly speaking to a structure and ideology, not about people. My tweet said whiteness is not special, not a criterion for making lives matter. I stand by that. Well, see, that's not what the tweet said. I have a screenshot of it. That is not what it said. And if that was the context around which she claims that this tweet was sent, then why would Twitter have deleted that? That makes no sense. But can you imagine if Candace Owens or Colonel Allen West or some other prominent black conservative said this? Or even to flip the script even further, can you imagine if Donald Trump had tweeted that Black lives don't matter? Can you imagine the media meltdown? Can you imagine the apoplexy that would grip them? I mean, it would be epic. But if Candace Owens or Colonel West had said that, or if Donald Trump had said Black lives don't matter, they would be labeled as racist, they would be vilified, they would be drummed out of polite society. And this woman was fucking promoted. All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And when we get back, we will get into even more left-wing hypocrisy. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, we could name this show Left-Wing Hypocrisy, and it would be valid for pretty much every topic we ever talk about. But obviously, we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment. And the left-wing website Media Matters took issue with some Second Amendment advocates who highlighted the violence that occurred over Father's Day weekend. Now, across the country, cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, New York, and Austin, just to name a few, were gripped with violence. They had several shootings in all different kinds of settings. But Media Matters singled out some articles in Breitbart and the Federalist, and some spots on Fox News, where the authors and commentators like Jesse Waters blamed the shootings on the calls to reform the police. Now, in these calls to reform the police and in these cities' vows to defund, or at least plans to defund and or disband the police in certain cities like Minneapolis, the police have pulled back. They saw what happened in Atlanta with Garrett Rolfe and him being charged with a felony murder. And cops across the country are, when they feel like their cities don't have their backs, well, they're going to pull back. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that if you show up for work, you need to do your job and do it to the best of your ability, while at the same time doing whatever you have to do to make sure that you go home at the end of your shift, and then let the chips fall where they may. But having said that, in their zeal to paint these Second Amendment advocates as right-wing extremists and racists for not wanting to defund the police, well, to be fair, the article didn't actually say they were racist. That was my added commentary. But I mean, that's pretty much implied, and that is stated elsewhere throughout this whole controversy. But in their zeal, they actually prove that gun control isn't needed and doesn't really work. Now, they admit in this article something that we've known for a long time now, and that violent crime is down. The police spend a very low percentage of their time responding to calls where violent crimes seem to have been committed. In Chicago, Minneapolis, and New York, the violent crime response is about 4% of the calls that they take. Now, in these cities that are talking about defunding the police, or in the case of Minneapolis, they have actually voted with a veto-proof vote to disband the police. In other cities, they have severely limited the power that the police have, with these leftist governments putting in all these restrictions and pretty much intimidating the police into not doing all that can be done. And in these jurisdictions where this is happening, they're seeing a huge spike in violent crime. Now, Media Matters is claiming that in the light of this, and I'll have this article up on the website so you can read it for yourself. But they're basically saying that it's silly to suggest that there's going to be more violence in the future if police reforms are enacted, as if to say that all police reforms are bad. Not all of them are bad, just the ones that take police resources off the streets. But there are some actually really good proposals out there, one of which is to have some more rigorous training for police officers and continuous training for police officers. Because as it stands right now, you go to the police academy and they put you out on the street, and a lot of times that's it. You may have to go requalify with your weapon every year, and there may be a week of some class that they have you take, but the budget for actual training is just not there. And so these guys either have to pay for it on their own or take their chances. And one of the things that really needs to be emphasized, I believe, in this training is hand-to-hand defensive tactics. Because like I said last week with Garrett Rolfe, there were opportunities that they could have ended that fight quickly, but chose not to for reasons that could have been training, could have been intentional. And again, I'm not going to relitigate that, but you understand what I'm saying there. Now, in this article, they say, quote, "Despite conservative media's best efforts, their narrative that reforming police departments will result in skyrocketing violence just does not square with the reality that the current surge in gun violence is taking place despite existing police policies. It also ignores the minimal amount of time police currently spend responding to violent crime calls compared to non-criminal responses." Okay, as usual, they want it both ways. Either violent crime is such a problem that we need to get rid of guns, or violent crime is so rare that we can afford to have little to no police presence. And if it's so rare that we need to have little to no police presence, why do they need to take our guns away? It's got to be one or the other. It can't be both. And let's be honest, they're not truly anti-gun. Like I said just a few seconds ago, they want to take your guns away. They're anti the masses. They're anti the great unwashed having guns. Because we've seen the video evidence of how they call for the police. They want a police presence, even though they want to defund them.
Get the fuck up, get the what? What the fuck are you doing? Assault. It's assault. Assault, stop assaulting me.
I know that audio was tough to make out, but that was Andrea Mitchell while she was interviewing Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton. And she was doing this in the Black House Autonomous Zone. And they were accosted by a tranny protester. And she literally said, "Where are the police?" You can't make this stuff up. They're so unself-aware that it's almost comical. And in this case, it is comical. Not that they almost got attacked, but just the lack of self-awareness is just astonishing. But like I said, we've seen tape of people calling for the police when they're threatened or when they feel threatened. these leftists who want to take your guns, they have their armed security details, and some of them even own guns. Dianne Feinstein carried a gun for a long time. At the same time, she was crusading against you having guns. And then, of course, we talked about Alyssa Milano last week, who owns at least a couple of guns. But she's out there railing against everyone else having guns. They trust the police. They trust themselves. But they don't trust you to have a gun to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your property. In that case, they want you to call the police. But here we go again. They want you to call the police, but then they want to defund the police. Their
hypocrisy knows no bounds.
All right, we're going to downshift here real quick and go back to this racism thing that we talked about earlier. And we're going to talk about Bubba Wallace. And I'm sure you've all heard by now, Bubba Wallace allegedly found a noose in his garage stall at Talladega. Talladega is a racetrack in Alabama. The one thing that this incident with Bubba Wallace brings to light is that the victim mentality has thoroughly permeated our culture. Now, it actually turns out that it wasn't a noose, according to the FBI. I know NASCAR released a photo seeming to support the assertion that it is a noose, but the photo is cropped. There's no timestamp. You can't even really tell from the angle where this picture, where it is. This so-called evidence to me is meaningless at this point. Now, I wanted to be a fan of Bubba Wallace. I would have liked to see a black man do well in NASCAR. I mean, he drives for Richard Petty Motorsports, which has not really been competitive in well over a decade, maybe two. Kyle Petty, he was a serviceable driver, and Bubba Wallace can't even compare to him, let alone any of the other top drivers. But I wanted to see him do well. I was hoping he would. But his attitude has been problematic over the years. And then with this incident, he really, really rubbed me the wrong way. Rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, I think. I think NASCAR fans already knew about his attitude issues. But this incident and some of the interviews that he's done brought that into the consciousness of the mainstream. I mean, he actually said that anyone who didn't believe him was simple-minded.
People are suggesting that this is a hoax or perhaps even staged by NASCAR to garner more support for the removal of the Confederate flag.
You know, it's simple-minded people like that, the ones that are afraid of change. They use everything in their power to defend what they stand up for.
So wanting to actually see evidence is simple-minded. But blindly believing a narrative is somehow enlightened at this point? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. But then after everything came to light, he went on Don Lemon's show. And I played some short clips of his appearance on a video that I did. But here's a longer clip of some of his mouth diarrhea.
One thing you'll never take away from me is how 100% I am, how raw I am, how real I am. And how I'll shoot it to you straight each and every time, because that's how I was brought up and that's what I stand by. I will always have haters. I will always have the motivators to go out there and to try to dethrone me from the pedestal that I am on.
He is so full of himself. He really believes he's a better driver than he is. And there is absolutely no chance I will ever be a fan of his at this point. And I still think that he saw an opportunity. Somebody told him it was a noose. I know he didn't see it himself initially, but somebody told him it was a noose, and he saw an opportunity to raise his profile and get a contract extension. Changed my mind. Now, you know the famous saying from Abraham Maslow, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, if you're a racist, every rope is a noose. Now, I know it's not a perfect parallel, but I think it's appropriate, because in Oakland, a black man, mind you, hung some ropes for doing exercises and swings for kids and things of that nature. And the man's name is Victor Sengbe, and he said that the ropes were part of a rigging that he and his friends used as part of a larger swing system and for exercise and things like that. Some people aren't buying the story. I get it. It seems legit to me. I could be wrong. I'm open to having my mind changed about it. But like I said in the video that I posted about Bubba Wallace, these things almost always turn out to be hoaxes. And definitely not what they were made out to be or interpreted to be. Now, the mayor of Oakland saw these on a social media post and immediately ordered a hate crime investigation. And that investigation is ongoing, but it seems that it's just like with the Bubba Wallace incident, it's going to be unfounded. And the ropes and the swings have been taken down, so it's a non-issue at this point. But the fact that it reached that pitch is just an indication of where we are as a country, and it's scary. It's scary on a number of levels, and I'm not sure where we end up going from here. But where we're going right now is we're going to take another quick break. And when we get back, we are unfortunately going to continue the theme because there's a couple of other things I really want to get to before we get you out of here. So stay tuned and we will be right back. So we're going to stick with the racism in sports thing. And there's a sports journalist by the name of Rob Parker. And I'm familiar with him because back when I used to consume a lot of sports, I consumed sports back then the way I consume news now. And back then he was always coming at things from a racial point of view. Hammer, nail. And so now, in this recent article in Deadspin, he is proposing that the Masters tournament change its name to the Augusta National Invitational, which is the original name of the tournament. This is stupid on a number of levels. First, it was named the Masters because one of the founders of the tournament wanted to evoke the feeling that the winner was a golf master. It had nothing to do with slavery. Now, he was originally overruled in 1934, but in 1939 he got his way, and the name of the tournament was changed to the Masters. And second, if you really want to distance the Masters from slave imagery and discrimination, move it to another golf course. Now, I'm not advocating for that either, but that would make more sense. Because Augusta National has a very troubling history with discrimination. The club didn't admit its first black member until 1990 when they extended a membership to Ron Townsend. And they didn't allow women until 2012, which that's a whole other discussion. But what is changing the name? First of all, who, when they think of the Masters, thinks of slavery? Even with the Augusta National course, even with the troubled history that it has in terms of race discrimination, who thinks of slavery? Who thinks of slave masters when they think of that golf tournament? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. When they think of the Masters, they think of Tiger Woods. They think of Greg Norman. They think of Tom Watson. They think of Jack Nicklaus. They think of some of the greatest moments in golf history. Slavery has never come into it. And this is coming from a guy who has the word Masters in his Twitter bio. So and looking at the Twitter bio, I don't know exactly why it's there other than maybe the Masters tournament. I mean, it's just ridiculous on so many levels. Another name change that's being proposed is the state of Rhode Island is considering changing its name. But no, they're not dropping Island because it's not an island, but they're not dropping that. Turns out the official name of the state of Rhode Island is the State of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Now, I had no idea. Did you? I don't think anybody who's ever learned the 50 states knew that. But they're considering changing it to Rhode Island. They're considering putting it on a ballot initiative so that the people can vote on it. It's been done before and it failed. So make of that what you will. In the current climate, it probably does have a chance to pass. But changing the name to what everyone already believed it to be, that's going to solve everything, isn't it? Just... Some of this isn't funny, but on a certain level it is, because it's just that ridiculous. All right, this is going to be our last story of the day. Statues and historic monuments are being torn down and defaced left and right these days. George Washington. Now, I know that the president has signed an executive order reiterating basically what is already in U.S. Code Title 18, where defacing or tearing down these statues is punishable by up to 10 years in prison. But the statues of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, Teddy Roosevelt are being either torn down or defaced or moved. But one statue that they threatened to tear down, and thankfully, before they had a chance to, the president signed this order, and law enforcement moved in to protect it. But the Emancipation Proclamation statue in Lincoln Park in D.C. This statue was erected in 1876 to honor President Lincoln for signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was paid for by freed slaves. And Frederick Douglass spoke at the unveiling ceremony of the statue. This is, I've said before, this is not about George Floyd anymore. This is not about police brutality anymore. This isn't even about racism anymore. This is about destruction. Now, the Black Lives Matter organization, and there is a distinction between the movement, the people who believe that Black Lives Matter and believe that there is something that needs to be done in terms of police brutality against Black people. I don't think that there's such, and I don't think that there's an epidemic of it, but fair-minded people who believe that it is a problem, I understand that. It's the organization that is at issue here. And the organization is run by trained Marxists.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
I'm sure they train their subordinates as in their image. So it's being run by Marxists. So when you look at Marxist philosophy, Karl Marx wanted to abolish some of the things that make this country great, and he wanted that worldwide. Family, individuality, independence, freedom, all things that we value. But he also wanted to eliminate the past. So Washington, Johnson were slave owners. So they have to come down. Lincoln never owned slaves, but his statue needs to come down because of racism or something. Ulysses S. Grant led the Union Army against the South, so he needs to come down because he owned a slave at some point in his life, even though the historical record shows that he was against it. Before he was vehemently against it, he was ambivalent towards it, so that's problematic. Roosevelt needs to come down because colonialism. We started off as colonies though, right? So I'm not sure where the problem is there. But anyway, we're going to play the what then game here. This is something that we like to do because the left never thinks past the immediate action. So if we play this out, where does it end? People keep asking, when was America great? So if they don't believe that America was ever great, what besides present day is worth preserving? Is anything besides present day worth preserving? in light of that worldview? Of course not. And this is how ISIS handled history in Iraq and Syria and Tunisia. The leaders of this movement and the effort to erase our history, they can't afford to have people look at these statues and these monuments as they were intended. They were intended as a reminder of what we've overcome, a way to look at where we were in terms of slavery and Jim Crow and say, look at where we are now. Now, obviously, that's not to say that things can't improve. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and among others all prove that. And that's not even coming at it from a position of, or a race perspective, just in terms of justice. But again, as long as people are involved, there's always going to be injustice. The issue is how we deal with it. And tearing down statues and trying to minimize and erase and have people forget our history. And I see all the memes, tearing down statues doesn't erase history. I understand that. But these statues, especially a lot of the really old ones, were there to remind people who couldn't read a book. But I know that we have books now. We have all the information at our fingertips and all the time on our phones. I get that, but there's still the awe when you stand in front of one of the statues, and just the feeling that it can evoke. That look at what this represents, and look how far we've come. All right, folks, that is all the time we have. I want to thank you all for making us part of your day. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Liberty Cast with Big E. If you like this show, please check us out on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and just about any of the other ones. Like us, subscribe, share the show, leave a review, let us know what you think. You can also find us on our website, thelibertycast.net, as well as therightway.site. We're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Parler, and Twitter at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. Once again, thank you for listening and have a great day.